Welcome to the Creating Wealth Show with Jason Hartman. You're about to learn a new slant on investing, some exciting techniques, and fresh new approaches to the world's most historically proven asset class that will enable you to create more wealth and freedom than you ever thought possible. Jason is a genuine self-made multimillionaire who's actually been there and done it. He's a successful investor, lender, developer, and entrepreneur who's owned properties in 11 states, had hundreds of tenants, and been involved in thousands of real estate transactions. This program will help you follow in Jason's footsteps on the road to your financial independence day. You really can do it. And now, here's your host, Jason Hartman, with the complete solution for real estate investors.
Welcome, listeners from around the world. Thank you so much for joining me today. This is your host, Jason Hartman, episode 1074. Got some news, current events, questions and answers, and such for you today. So, there is a small war raging in the financial world. You probably know what it is. No, it is not the trade war, although that is one that is talked about a lot. It is the mini war of words between the president and the Federal Reserve. Of course, the president, he doesn't want to see them rain on his parade. It's truly an amazing economic expansion we are seeing under Trump. And I predicted this, and even though I have my reservations about Trump, I told you a long time ago he would be great for the economy. And I believe I'm the only one who said he's our first real estate president. Yeah, I know. That actually matters. I think it does. You know, forget about The Apprentice and all that stuff. He's a real estate guy, okay? Love him, hate him, whatever. He's a real estate guy, and he knows how to make business work. It is so refreshing, love him or hate him, to see a business person in the White House. And I'll tell you, I hope after his term, or terms, who knows, we'll see. We got midterms coming up. We'll see how that goes. It may be a Democratic wave. I don't know. We'll see. I haven't really been following it. You know, honestly, and this may surprise you, I'm really not that into politics. I'm just more into the broad philosophy of things. I like a more laissez-faire approach to government. I dub myself as a libertarian, but sometimes I don't sound like one because just the way things work, especially capital formation, you don't have free markets, and so you can't have free markets all the way through. You know, it's a domino effect. One thing has to influence the other, and boy, it sure does influence the other very, very significantly. But as I've said, this Federal Reserve under Jerome Powell is the most transparent Federal Reserve I have ever known. They just say, look, they're just going to keep raising rates. And I tell you, if that doesn't give you some unrest and how you should capitalize on stocking up on these cheap long-term fixed-rate 30-year investment-grade mortgages that are assets. The mortgage is an asset. Yes, it is. You really should be doing that because they are phenomenal. The deals on those mortgages are nothing short of amazing. Even now, even after we've seen the price increase on those mortgages, they are still phenomenal. But you know, Trump doesn't want them to take away the punch bowl, and the Fed is mostly in control of the punch bowl. You know, is the bar going to close and stop serving drinks? Now, that's funny to say because Trump doesn't even drink, right? But the party can be ended by the Federal Reserve very quickly as they tighten. And, you know, I would argue they certainly need to tighten. The interest rates have been artificially low for way too long. And remember, looking back in history, this whole thing, this whole credit-based economy, it's interesting to look back at it. When the Great Recession began, you know, about 10 years ago, the pundits were always talking about the money supply. But they were almost never talking about what I was talking about. And that was the credit supply. Now, I know you could argue that the credit supply and the money supply are the same thing, but they're really not the same thing. So when in history did the world really, really change in terms of the financial world? Well, there were several points at which that happened, of course. There was the founding of the Federal Reserve just over 100 years ago. Of course, we've had G. Edward Griffin on the show many times. He spoke at one of our Meet the Masters events a couple of years ago. Another big pundit on the Federal Reserve and student of it is, of course, Ron Paul. He spoke at our last Meet the Masters event, and they've both been on the show. And so the Federal Reserve, that was really a very fundamental shift just over 100 years ago. And then, of course, there's Bretton Woods, right? And Bretton Woods really came in two parts. There was the earlier part of it, and then the sort of, we'll call it the finale of it much later. And then there was the gold standard, and all these things, of course, tie together. Nixon closed the gold window, finally, in 1971. And that was a big, big change, right? These are the things we think of. But you know, one we really rarely think of is when the world of credit really began. Okay, of course, we've had credit for eons. I don't mean debtors and loans and so forth, and I'm not going back to biblical times, and I'm not going to talk about the money changers and Jesus throwing their tables over and so forth, and, the Islamic view of interest and debt, and, I'm not going to talk about that kind of stuff. I'm talking about modern credit. I want to talk to you about the Diners Club. Yeah, the Diners Club. Anybody heard of that credit card? Well, it was one of the first big credit cards, the Diners Club card. Remember the Diners Club card? I remember hearing about it, seeing it, never had one. I don't even know if it's still around. But Diners Club, is an old-fashioned credit card, right? And this modern expansion of credit really started somewhere, I would say. It's hard to put your finger on it. No, my finger can't find it. I'm moving my finger around. Finger, I don't know where to put it. But somewhere in the 50s, right? And then it expanded more into the 60s and really, really got a foothold in the 70s. And that's when we saw this massive expansion of credit, where consumers could be more than they really were. They could buy cars on credit. We had mortgages long before that, but the mortgages, of course, became much more liberal, and credit just got everywhere. The student loan bubble really started in the 70s, right? Financing college educations. I mean, that was a huge expansion in credit, and now it's a giant bubble worth about $1.3 trillion. That's trillion with a T dollars. That is a bubble that is going to burst, by the way, and have a big effect on the economy. So we saw this expansion of credit, and you know what that created? It created a lot of people with this phenomenon. Maybe you've heard this saying. Ready? Ready for it? Okay, here it is. The quote for the day is not from me, but I just think it's a funny one. And the quote is, "Big hat, no cattle." Big hat, no cattle, right? And this describes someone who's a faker, a poser, a wannabe, right? They've got the nice car, maybe they got the yacht or the motorhome, but they're drowning in debt. I saw this a lot when I lived in Newport Beach, California. And anywhere around the world where you have, number one, access to credit, and number two, and access to credit is most pronounced in the United States, of course, but number two, you have a high status seeking area, right? Newport Beach would certainly qualify as one of those areas. Anywhere in Los Angeles, really the whole West Coast, and then all the major sort of high-end cities around the U.S. and then around the world, right? This is where you have many people who are kind of paper thin. And I remember one of my friends in Newport Beach years ago, a commercial real estate broker, by the way, certainly a big hat, no cattle kind of guy. He drove a Porsche, an expensive car, was always, talking about money, putting on airs about, this, that, and the other thing to, get the greatest girls, right? And, it was BS. I mean, it was just big hat, no cattle. Whenever we'd go out and, back in the days when I usually actually drink, I hardly drink at all anymore. By the way, that's a suggestion I have. Folks, I never was big into alcohol, but I just don't even like it anymore. Like, I have no interest in drinking at all. And I would recommend giving that one up if you imbibe, because it's just not good for you. and it's not doing anything for you, and it's costing you a lot of money, but the most important cost is the cost on your body. Okay, enough of my tangent, my editorializing. I'll drink to that. Hey, I had a beer yesterday. It's not like I never do it. I'm just saying, I really don't do it much. We'll do a little bit of that in Hawaii, okay? I'm sure I'll have to have a Mai Tai in Hawaii because, hey, that's what you do there. Okay, so we're talking about taking away the punch bowl and the Federal Reserve and so forth. So whenever it was this friend's turn to buy a round of drinks, when we'd go out, you couldn't find the guy. He was in the bathroom, he was talking to someone else, he was hiding out. And this is like that paper-thin kind of big hat, no cattle kind of thing, right? You've all experienced it. I know you know someone like this. Maybe you've been someone like that at some point. Hey, we're all just human, right? But the thing that's going on here is this little mini war, not the trade war, between the Federal Reserve and the president. And the Federal Reserve says they're just going to ignore any of the Trump administration blather. So I don't think Trump is going to get to do his bully pulpit tweeting about the Fed. He's going to do it, obviously, but I don't think it's going to work. I'll put it that way. I don't think it's really going to make any difference one way or the other. But I do think they're probably tightening a little fast. I think the Fed needs to take a chill pill and relax a little bit. Yes, take away that punch bowl slowly. When you want to do last call at the bar, give a lot of warning. And they're giving a lot of warning, but I think they're being pretty aggressive here, and they got to go a little slower would be what I would say. But whatever they do, I don't know. Let's listen to this CNBC interview with the CEO of Redfin talking about the housing market. And of course, when you listen to this, like always, you have to remember these sound bites are ridiculously generalistic. They don't subdivide. Is he talking about linear markets, cyclical markets, or hybrid markets? I'll stop it along the way and help you analyze it. But it is an interesting interview, so I want to play it for you. Here we go.
Hard to say when we're going to see stabilization. I don't think it's just the tax laws. It's rising prices, it's slow wage growth, and it's rising rates. That has been a perfect storm for the U.S. housing market. What the tax laws are doing are really shaking up the snow globe of where Americans live. People are moving from California and other high-tax states to places that provide some relief. And the reason they're doing that is because they can't write it off anymore on their federal return.
I guess the question then, another way of asking this is, when we see this migration, the cities to which they migrate, are we seeing prices there continue to rise, or is there a stabilization there?
The prices are definitely stronger, and in some places they're rising. If you look at Boise, Idaho, Nashville, Tennessee, places in Texas, Pittsburgh, Detroit, those are the destinations for people who are looking for the next turn in the economy and who are looking for some tax relief.
Be careful listening to that, by the way, okay? Because a lot of that is already priced in, okay? And I certainly would be highly suspect of that Detroit comment, okay? Now, yes, there has been a lot of appreciation in Detroit from the bottom, okay, and only in very selected areas. So you got to be very careful with this sort of generalistic stuff. But the general comment harkens back to the interview I did years ago with Meredith Whitney, who wrote that fantastic book, The State of the States, Meredith Whitney. And she really nailed it. I mean, go back and listen to that interview. Go to jasonhartman.com, type in Meredith Whitney or The State of the States, and that's an interview worth listening to again. And this is something that I predicted back in 2004. I knew this was coming long before I had any idea there would be this tax law and there would be the SALT, S-A-L-T acronym, the state and local taxes, and how you can only deduct $10,000 of that now under the new federal tax plan. But it is causing the migration. Well, the migration has been going on for years, but the migration is picking up steam because there's even more incentive to do it. People are moving. Look I did it, okay? I can afford to live in California easily, many times over for the rest of my life without ever working again. Well, depends how you want to live, but I could live very comfortably in California for the rest of my life without ever working again. But it doesn't mean I want to. Look, folks, it's a funny thing how people without money think, right? This has just always struck me as funny, and I guess when I didn't have money, I used to think this way too. People without money kind of think, well, hey, you've got money, why do you care? Well, guess what? it was hard to earn that money, and I care. Just because someone has money doesn't mean they're stupid. Now, some people do get stupid with and without money, but hey, that's up to them. It's all individual. So we see this migration is being exacerbated. It's being really incentivized now because of the new tax law. So that's an interesting trend. And I've made this recommendation to you for many years. If you can do it, and maybe you can't do it now, but make it part of your 5-year plan to get some shelter from these high-cost, high-tax areas. I'll give you an example, right? I've been traveling around, and right now I happen to be in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Florida. And, I've been kicking around here for a while. I was down with Carmen. She and I were in Naples, and then we came up here. I was in Sarasota. And, there are charming, wonderful areas that are dripping with ambiance and benefits, and there's no state income taxes. And the cost of living is low. I know what you're going to say, Californians. I can already hear you. Oh, but what about the weather? I agree with you. Listen, being in Florida in the summer, or Arizona, where that was my favorite place to live so far, Scottsdale, Arizona. And I might go back there and suffer the 5% taxes someday, but it won't be as bad as 13.3% in the Socialist Republic of California or New York, right? Look, the weather in California isn't always great either, okay? That's a myth. It gets very cold sometimes. I mean, at least for me, I don't know. Hey, I'm getting older, I don't like cold, but I don't like extreme heat or humidity either. I don't like anything anymore. But let me tell you, right now in Florida, in the morning and the evening, it is beautiful. It's just stunning here. It's just beautiful here. It's sunny, cheerful. I mean, there are lots of places. Look at, hey, if you like cool and rain, you can move to Seattle Washington State or Wyoming and have a lower cost of living. Well, not in Seattle, but a little lower. But no state income taxes, right? So there's all kinds of choices out there. I'm just saying, think about it, consider it as part of your 5-year plan, if you can't do it right away, to free yourself from this oppressive burden of high cost of living and high tax and regulatory overreaching places, because there are just more pleasant places to live, I promise you. There really are. There really are. Okay, let's keep listening.
Cases, houses are affordable, traffic is less, folks really are just looking for a place where they can afford to live. And what's crazy about the U.S. economy right now is it's going so great, and yet people feel so poor. Folks who are trying to buy a home are really frustrated. They can afford gas and groceries and everything else, just not a place to live.
So they're going to rent. And who they going to rent from? They're going to rent from you! Yes, because what he's alluding to right there is my 3 dimensions of real estate. And of course, I've shared that with you on the show before many times. And there, when we see housing affordability decline, of course, we see prices are still very high. Rates are going up. So affordability is getting just crushed. It's getting absolutely crushed right now. So the people that bought a few years ago, hey, they're lucky. They got in, they got the low rates, they got the lower prices, and they're good. Hopefully they got 30-year fixed-rate loans and they can stay put. Now, here's the other thing that I mentioned before, and that is that when people have these low-rate mortgages, it's like having a rent-controlled unit, a rent-controlled apartment in one of these socialistic rent-controlled areas. It stops the velocity of the market. It impedes it because people don't move. Even if they want to move, if their family's expanding, if they need a place in a different area or a bigger place or whatever, they don't move because that rent control keeps them stuck. So it hurts the market in so many other ways. And the same is true of artificially low interest rate mortgages. It's like rent control because it keeps people holding on to what they've got because that mortgage does not transfer with the property. And that mortgage, as I've said for 14 years, is an asset. It's not a liability as long as it's a good, cheap, long-term fixed-rate mortgage. That's an asset. That's a big part of the asset. So it causes inventory to be tight, but that won't last forever. The inventory will ease up, as we see this shift in the market. But this shift is far from hitting the lower price properties that you're buying as good, solid income properties with good rent-to-value ratios. It's happening significantly on the higher price properties, and we've chronicled that before, of course. Now, one thing that I did mention in one of the interviews, but I don't think I mentioned it directly in one of my monologues or intros yet. I read a report just last week, and this really shocked me. Housing, and at the risk of my repeating myself, okay, construction cost, 6 years, like-kind single-family home today is 31% more expensive to construct. That's without the cost of the land. Without the cost of the land, the cost of construction has risen by 31% in 6 short years. What did I tell you? I don't even like real estate that much. I like being a commodities investor. I trademark the term. Packaged commodities investing, assembled commodities investing, right? You're owning all of those ingredients to a house or an apartment building, and those ingredients have become dramatically more expensive, 31% more expensive, including assembly. Yes, the houses do come assembled in 6 short years. I mean, from 2012 to 2018, 31% increase, not including land cost. That is absolutely startling. Let's finish this video, and I want to get to some listener Q&A if we have time.
In April, you had said that higher mortgage rates were not a big deal to buyers, but rising prices were. I know that was April, and things have changed, and rates have moved up.
Yeah, you got me. So
what's
buyers
the deal?
are definitely shaking it off then. They aren't now. And I think part of that is because in coastal cities, we've seen such a rapid increase in prices. And when you couple that with rising rates and also a glut in places like Seattle of rental inventory, we've seen people who were looking at buying a house suddenly realize they can pay less in rent.
Now, the glut of rental inventory he's really referring to is the overabundance of institutional-style apartment buildings, because as you've seen, the symbolic bird of every city in America has been the crane, right? In the past several years, the construction has been crazy. And by the way, I just tell you, little tangent here. Indulge me for a second. You know how I hate leaf blowers, right? And you know how I talk about how noise, we hardly ever think about it, noise, right? Noise is the scourge of modern society. And I've been to 81 countries around the world, many of those, well, certainly all of them, less economically advantaged than the United States. And I'll tell you something, here's a new Hartmanism. A booming economy is a noisy environment. You know why? Because in a booming economy, everything's always under construction. I mean, I'm outside of the hotel this morning trying to eat breakfast. You got leaf blowers, gardeners, construction of this new building across the street. There's just construction and noise everywhere. It's unbelievable. So a booming economy is a noisy environment. You know, when I was in Eastern Europe, or anywhere in Europe for that matter, and I've been to both several times, you know, those economies aren't doing so well. And guess what? It's kind of quiet. There's not all this construction. So that is one benefit of a slower economy.
And so lots of folks are pulling back. We aren't going to know how it's really going to affect the housing market long term until we see next year. We're in the kind of funky part of the real estate market. November, December, you can't count on anything. But if there's a strong economy, a roaring stock market, low unemployment, I think people are still going to pay up. It's just going to be a little harder with tax reform and interest rates being higher too.
And what they're going to do is they're going to accept less. They've already done that. It's not like they're not going to buy something or rent something. They're just going to have to take less than they got before.
To want to migrate to a place with lower taxes, but let's not forget that because the changes in the tax law and the inability to take advantage of the SALT deduction, the state and local income tax, it's hard to sell your house. It's not just a buying issue, it's a seller's problem as well. Somebody has to buy your house, and in these areas where they're most affected by all this, I imagine that would slow down some of the migration.
Well, if you're selling a house in LA to buy a house in Boise, Idaho, you're going to come out ahead. There's been an inventory shortage for a long time that has only recently reversed in the California markets and elsewhere. I do think people come into these states like Idaho with funny money, where they just feel rich looking at $200,000 or $300,000 houses. So I do.
Remember, I've always warned you, especially you Californians, my home state, because I've done more speaking engagements in California, and we've got more clients from California probably than anywhere else, although we have clients from all over the world, of course. But I always caution you, be careful taking your California brain to some of the other markets that you'll find at jasonhartman.com in the properties section, because they all look cheap, right? And everything is very local. All real estate is local, as we always say.
The trend long term is for more Americans to move inward, and those places that New York media types would call flyover are now destinations.
All right, so I hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was interesting, and I thought I'd share it with you. Now, before we wrap up today, let me tell you about, we haven't held a contest in a while, so I thought it's time to hold another contest. Now, I hope this page will be ready by the time you hear this message. I think it will be. Go to jasonhartman.com/contest, jasonhartman.com/contest, and do a quick 20-second entry. See, we make it easy to enter our contest. No big things, just a quickie. Go there and win a Ring doorbell or an Amazon Echo. Yes, we've given away those Echoes a few times. So a Ring doorbell or an Amazon Echo, go there and check it out. Just fill out the quick form, 20 seconds, jasonhartman.com/contest. Be sure to do that. Folks, your odds of winning are pretty good. Not many people enter these contests, so your odds of winning are good. I mean, we'll have maybe, 100,000 downloads in a month, and we'll have, 50 people enter the contest. So your odds are really quite good. It's not like entering the lottery where you're like 37 trillion to 1. So go there and be sure to take advantage of the contest and win one of those great prizes. All right, so let's get to some Q&A. Hang on. Here is our first listener comment/question.
It's from Lena Bibikov. What motivated you to take action and purchase your first income property? Passive income in order to spend more time with my daughters. What long-term goals have you set for yourself? How will income property help you get there? My long-term goal is to have enough passive income coming in that we are able to travel with the church missions and build communities. This from Stephen Kakis.
That's awesome.
What motivated you to take action and purchase your first income property? Trying to get out of the rat race. What long-term goals have you set for yourself? How will income property help you get there? I would like to buy at least one rental property a year for the next 10 years. My passive cash flow goal is $10,000 per month.
That is awesome. Very awesome.
Question from Bob Grunig. Jason, I'm a real estate investor with 2 single-family homes thus far. I heard your invitation on a recent podcast asking people with specialized skills to contact you for the purpose of putting these skills to work for your company. I love writing and editing documents and would like to offer my services to you in this capacity. I write on a daily basis in my current role as an attorney. Further, various groups have contacted me based on my writing and editing abilities. Finally, I help coach a robotics team and, in particular, the drafting of an engineering notebook which requires the ability to write in both technical and layman's terms. My desire is to learn more about real estate from you and others while putting my writing and editorial skills to work for your benefit. I hope that you will consider contacting me if you should require my writing and editorial services. This from David Lopez. Hello, I have over 20 years in mobile entertainment. I have hosted and have been an MC at wedding and corporate events here in SoCal. At one time, I had a podcast and interviewed many people in the industry. I could host, entertain, or record interviews for the podcast here in Los Angeles. I could send you a link to a podcast as a sample. Now that you have Jason's attention, is there anything else you'd want to tell him? Great show. I would love to work with you in recording interviews.
Hey, folks, that is great. I very much appreciate that. And we have been hiring people like crazy lately. I mean, we are just on a real growth kick, and it's been very fun, but I've been very busy working with all of them. You're going to see some of the results of this at our Hawaii event, by the way. Our economist will be there. We're going to do panel discussions with him, 2 panel discussions scheduled. We've got all kinds of really cool stuff going on in the software world and a whole bunch of other things. And you know what was one of the big inspirations to do this? It was the tax savings. I thought, what am I going to do with that tax savings from the new tax plan? Well, I got to figure out how to spend it and put that money back into the economy. That works. That seems like a pretty good win-win to me. Okay, folks, that is it for today. Remember, invest in places that make sense so you can afford to live in places that don't make sense. But that doesn't mean high tax places or high cost of living places. Just get a house in a place that makes sense, where you get a house that doesn't make any sense. Or do whatever you want, okay? But follow that principle and you will be in very good shape. For those of you coming to Hawaii, we will look forward to seeing you there. If you want to get a last-minute ticket, we are less than 2 weeks out, so do that. I know we had one person actually buy their airfare today. It's still pretty good, you know. There's an airfare war going on, and it's amazingly inexpensive to fly to Hawaii right now. So we look forward to seeing all of you there. Until the next episode, happy investing. We will talk to you in just 2 days. Thank you so much for listening. Please be sure to subscribe so that you don't miss any episodes. Be sure to check out the show's specific website and our general website, hartmanmedia.com, for appropriate disclaimers and terms of service. Remember that guest opinions are their own, and if you require specific legal or tax advice or advice in any other specialized area, please consult an appropriate professional. And we also very much appreciate you reviewing the show. Please go to iTunes or Stitcher Radio or whatever platform you're using and write a review for the show. We would very much appreciate that. And be sure to make it official and subscribe so you do not miss any episodes. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode.